It's Thursday, and joining me is Denis Campbell, editor-in-chief of UK Progressive Magazine for Worldview with Denis Campbell, of course also author of the ebook The Vagina Wars. Denis, I think a good topic for this week is the militarization of police forces around the world. We can kind of talk a little bit about the upcoming Olympics. We can also talk about what's going on in Egypt. And I think, a lot of times people assume when they hear that term, militarization of police, they assume it's just like regular police, but slightly more aggressive. But really, we're talking about something that resembles an army, really, not a police force.
Exactly, and if you look at the way in which the degrees of things such as body armor and batons and specialized weapons. I mean, we talked about Egypt in your introduction there for a second, and they're undergoing their first presidential election yesterday and today in the history of that nation. So for 5,000 years, they haven't had elected leaders, but they have had rather brutal police regimes. And if you look in particular to the events of last October, November, when the uprising started anew because the protesters didn't like the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces taking over, a lot of what we saw was weapons-grade tear gas with nerve agents, with body armor, with machinery and tools to hold crowds back that no longer represented just the simple shields and batons of the past. And when I started to look at some of the demonstrations that have gone on here in the UK against things such as the recent university, well, it was about a year ago, the tuition increases, you saw military-style tactics being used to kettle or otherwise put people into a little boxed area and to sort of cut off communications. They were cutting off BlackBerry and other areas. And this is all part of a procedure I think you're going to see come to a head. You saw a bit of it last weekend in Chicago for the NATO and the Afghanistan meeting.
Yeah, we talked about the armed drone flying overhead in Elgin, Illinois, and all of that. I mean, these are really reminiscent of a war zone, not a just not domestic police procedures, aren't they?
Indeed, and you're starting to tread on some very basic civil liberties, excuse me. The ability for a public to use their voice and use their freedom of speech to speak out against a government is being severely tested everywhere. In some of the legislation you've seen passed, for example, even in the United States, or attempted to be passed, equating what used to be free speech and protest now with terrorism, is just a tip of the iceberg. But if you look at how military budgets are being frozen for pure military purposes, but you see increasing amounts of money being spent on non-lethal weapons, tasers, things of that sort. The money that's being spent now on police forces and the way in which they're using them to intimidate peaceful protesters is nothing short of a crime.
So let's talk a little bit then about the upcoming London Olympics, which are set to start soon. We already did one story, I think it was last week, maybe it was on our bonus show, about whether seeing the surface-to-air missile defense sites near the Olympic Stadium, the Olympic area, would make you think that you are safer, or whether it would actually prompt you to feel like you're in a less safe area. What, in addition to that, is to be expected as far as security goes around the Olympics?
Well, we've had some fairly dubious and famous stories here about people not wanting to see any of the security procedures themselves filmed. When the site was under construction, members of the press corps were allowed to come in, and I'm scheduled to go on another visit very shortly to see what the facilities look like at various stages of their construction. And even then, when they were under construction, what you had to undergo was worse than anything you would have seen in any airport. Everything was screened. You went through metal detectors. You went through body scanners, very similar to the full body scanners you're seeing at the airport. And they recently did a test run for the Olympics themselves. The stadium holds about 85,000 people. There were 40,000 invited guests, and what they wanted to do is they wanted to fill half the stadium and do sort of a dry run to make sure that everything worked. Security took 4 times as long as they had planned, so they need to do something there. The games themselves did not run particularly well. The scoreboard cut out. They had all sorts of glitches. And this is partly why they do things such as this. But the whole police presence, they're expecting to have something like 24,000 uniformed police on patrolling in and around this massive site. And there are also several venues that are located outside of the Olympic Village that are going to be affected.
All right, we'll definitely want to check in with you more as we get closer and closer to the actual start of the Olympics. We've been speaking with
just don't make me go there, okay?
We won't make you do the high jump or anything. We've been speaking with Denis Campbell, Worldview with Denis Campbell, every Thursday. He's editor-in-chief of UK Progressive Magazine and also author of the ebook The Vagina Wars. Thanks so much for joining us, Denis.
Thank you.